She came to Montana to marry a stranger, but found 7 orphaned children clinging to an empty home instead. In a land that feared her Apache blood, she chose to stay when everyone expected her to walk away. One woman's courage, 7 fragile hearts, and a frontier miracle waiting to happen. Let's get started. The Montana winter bit through Narlin's deerskin coat as she rode toward the lonely ranch. She had traveled for days, crossing frozen creeks and wind-carved plains, clutching the letter from a widowed cowboy who said he needed help raising his children. She had imagined meeting him at the gate, grateful, waiting. But as her horse slowed near the sagging fence, she felt an eerie stillness settle over the land. No smoke from the chimney, no footprints in the snow, no horse tied to the post. Just cold wind sliding over abandoned wood. Her heart sank. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. She dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the snow, breath clouding in the sharp air. The house stood dark, its door slightly ajar, swaying with each gust. She pushed it open, expecting silence, maybe emptiness. Instead, she heard soft feet scuffle across the floorboards, quick, frightened, unsteady. She stepped inside carefully, eyes adjusting to the dim room. Then she saw them, 7 children, thin as winter branches, staring at her with a mix of fear and hope. Their clothes were threadbare, their cheeks hollow, their hair tangled. The smallest girl clung to the oldest boy's shirt, trembling. Narlin knelt slowly, hands open so she wouldn't frighten them. The children didn't speak at first, just watched her like skittish fawns. Then the oldest boy, 12, maybe 13, swallowed hard and stepped forward. "Ma'am, did you bring any food?" His voice cracked from hunger more than fear. Narlin's throat tightened. She had come for one man's home, perhaps even for a husband. She had not come prepared for 7 starving children. But in that moment, instinct rose stronger than surprise. She reached into her satchel, pulling out dried berries, cornmeal, and a small bundle of jerky. The younger children rushed forward, as if unable to stop themselves, hands trembling as they accepted what she offered. The oldest boy tried to keep order, telling them to wait their turns, but his voice held no strength. Narlin placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Eat first, questions later," she said softly. Questions later. As they ate, she looked around the house. The kitchen was cold, pots unwashed, blankets thrown across the floor where the children must have slept together for warmth. No adult footprints, no fresh water fetched, no wood cut for days. She recognized the signs immediately. Children surviving alone. When they finished the small meal, the oldest boy finally gathered his courage. "Pa ain't coming back," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "He got sick when the snow came. We tried to keep him warm, but—" The boy's eyes glistened. "He died 2 weeks ago. We buried him." "Ourselves." Narlin closed her eyes briefly, absorbing his words. She saw their exhaustion, their grief, their fear of what came next. 7 children left alone on a ranch miles from town, through the heart of winter, no neighbors close enough to hear their cries. She felt a heaviness settle in her chest. She asked quietly, "Why didn't anyone send word?" The children exchanged glances before the oldest answered. "Pa was worried someone would take us apart. He said we had to stay together. After he died, we didn't know who to trust, and we didn't have a horse that could make the trip." Narlin's gaze softened. Their loyalty to each other reminded her of her own people, families bound by survival, even when the world pressed too hard. She rose and moved to the hearth, checking the cold ashes. She needed fire, food, water, and warmth for them all, and needed it quickly. She found a stack of uncut wood outside, frozen stiff but still usable. She carried several logs inside, placed them carefully, and struck flint until sparks caught. The flames rose slowly, spreading heat through the room. The children crept closer, hands outstretched toward the warmth like flowers turning to sun. As the fire grew, she turned to the children. "I will stay for tonight," she said gently. "You are not alone." They didn't react immediately, perhaps afraid to hope, but the smallest girl walked to Nalin, tugged her coat sleeve and whispered, "Can you stay tomorrow too?" Nalin didn't answer yet. She couldn't make promises she didn't understand. She was an Apache woman in a land not always kind to her people. A ranch owned by a dead man offered uncertainty, and this life, taking in 7 children, was nothing like what she had imagined when she left her village. But as she cooked the little food she had into a warm pot of cornmeal porridge, she realized something unexpected. This house did not feel empty. Their father's boots still stood by the door. Their drawings hung on the walls. Their laughter, faint and hesitant, began to return with the fire's warmth. When the youngest fell asleep against her arm, Nalin felt something shift within her. She had not held a child in years, not since her own family had scattered after sickness swept their camp. She had hardened herself against such attachments, believing them too dangerous for a woman always moving. Yet here, in this quiet Montana cabin, surrounded by small breaths and tired eyes, she felt her heart wake in ways she had forgotten. She studied the children's faces, the fear fading, the trust building, the silent hope that she wouldn't walk out come morning. When the fire burned strong and the children finally slept, she stepped outside into the cold air. The moon lit the snow in silver. The land stretched silent and vast around her. She looked toward the road she had arrived on. She could still leave. She could ride away before dawn. But the image of 7 small bodies, huddled together for warmth, flashed in. Her mind. They needed someone, anyone, to stand between them and the winter, and fate had placed her here, not by force, but by choice. She felt the weight of that choice pressing on her chest. She walked back inside, closing the door firmly behind her. She hung her coat on the peg, set her satchel down, and added more wood to the fire. She moved quietly among the children, adjusting blankets, tucking cold hands inside folds of cloth, smoothing tangled hair with gentle fingers. As she settled near the hearth, she whispered to the sleeping room, "Rest now. You are safe tonight." The words felt strange on her tongue, like a promise forming before she fully understood it. Yet it felt right, deep in her bones, in the place where old wounds still lived. She had arrived expecting a husband. Instead, she found 7 children clinging to life in the heart of winter, and though she did not yet know what tomorrow would bring, she felt the first thread of destiny weaving itself through her. She could leave, but her spirit knew she wouldn't. By the time the fire crackled into steady warmth and moonlight filtered through the frost-covered window, Nalin understood something clearly. She had not come to this house by accident. These children were placed in her path for a reason she could not yet name. And though the world outside remained cold and unforgiving, inside that small Montana cabin, a new beginning quietly took root, born not of marriage, but of courage, compassion, and the fragile hope she saw in 7 pairs of eyes. She had come seeking one future, but found a calling far greater. The neighbors came at midday, riding in on stiff saddles and stiff opinions. They stood on the porch with folded arms, eyes cautious on the Apache woman who now moved through the dead cowboy's home as if she belonged there. One of them cleared his throat and said she'd be forgiven if she left. They spoke with polite words, but uneasy undertones. Words that said she was different, words that said she didn't owe these children anything. The weight of their stares pressed on Nalin, but she did not answer them. She simply continued chopping wood, the rhythm grounding her against doubt. When the neighbors left, the house grew quiet again. 7 small faces peeked around corners, watching Nalin for signs of leaving. She felt their fear like a whisper crawling through the floorboards. They had been abandoned once by death. They expected abandonment again by life. She couldn't blame them. As dusk settled, Nalin lit the lantern and moved through the kitchen, cooking what little there was. Cornmeal, a sliver of dried meat, a handful of wild onions she'd gathered near the creek. The aroma filled the house, softening the lines of worry on the children's faces. Hunger united them more than words. The children gathered around the table, hesitant at first. The oldest boy insisted the younger ones eat before him. Nalin watched quietly, recognizing strength in that child. Strength carved by responsibility far too soon. When she handed him his bowl, his hands trembled, not from cold, but gratitude he didn't know how to voice. Later, as night deepened and snow whispered against the windows, Nalin sat by the fire with the youngest girl curled against her chest. The little one had cried herself to sleep, clinging to Nalin's blanket, as if it was something holy. Nalin wrapped her up gently, heart aching with unfamiliar tenderness. She studied the children's sleeping faces, soft, peaceful, trusting. She wondered when they had last felt safe enough to sleep without fear. She wondered how long they had cried alone after their father died. And she wondered why fate had brought her to this door, to this exact moment. When the lantern dimmed, she stepped outside into the cold night. The sky above Montana glittered with icy stars, each one seeming to watch her with a patient, ancient gaze. She breathed in the sharp air, letting her thoughts settle like snow on the silent earth. The decision forming inside her grew stronger. She walked to the small mound behind the barn, their father's grave. The wooden cross leaned slightly, beaten by storms. She knelt beside it, brushing snow from the surface, offering a moment of stillness. She whispered a prayer in her own tongue for his soul and for the children he left behind. The next morning, she returned to the grave with tools. The children gathered at a distance, unsure of what she intended. With quiet determination, she worked, tightening the cross, clearing the snow, pressing the earth firm again. It was an act of respect, of closure, of claiming responsibility for what came next. The oldest boy approached her timidly. "Ma'am, why are you doing that?" He looked so small, asking a question far too big. Nalin rested a hand on the cross and met his gaze. "Because someone must," she said. "And I was chosen to walk here." She wasn't sure if he understood, but he nodded. Afterward, she walked back to the house, with the children trailing behind her like fragile shadows. Inside, she lit a fresh fire, filling the home with warmth that felt deeper than wood and flame. The children watched her, gathered like a small flock seeking direction, comfort and permission to hope again. She sat by the table and motioned for them to sit. They hesitated, unused to adults wanting them close. Then they came slowly, one by one, sitting silently across from her. Their eyes waited on her, wide and uncertain, as if one wrong word might shatter what little trust they had left. Nalin placed her hands on the table, steady and calm. "Listen," she said softly, "you have lost much, more than any child should." Their eyes lowered, faces clouding with memories they didn't want to carry. She continued, voice firm but gentle. "But you are not alone anymore. Not while I breathe." The words hung in the air like a promise wrapped in firelight. The oldest boy's lips parted as if to ask a question, but instead he whispered, "Are you staying?" The uncertainty in his voice broke something deep in Nalin, something she had kept guarded for years. She felt it unravel. "I will stay," she said. Not a whisper, no hesitation. A decision forged from instinct, loss, and a kind of love she hadn't expected to feel. The room held its breath. The youngest girl climbed into her lap and laid her head on Nalin's shoulder as if she'd belonged there forever. For the first time in many months, perhaps years, the children laughed, a thin, uncertain laugh at first, then growing, warming the room like a living flame. Nalin watched them, feeling a sense of purpose settle in her chest with the weight and certainty of a new dawn rising. Over the next days, the ranch changed. Nalin woke before sunrise to fetch water, cook meals, clean the house that had long been forgotten by grief. She taught the children to gather wood, to dry meat, to braid rope, to survive the long Montana winter. Slowly, The home breathed again. The neighbors returned, expecting to find the children gone or the house abandoned. Instead, they found smoke curling from the chimney, children tending chores under Nalin's watchful eyes. Their surprise was plain, but so was a reluctant respect. She was not a woman to leave things undone. In time, they learned her strength. Her silence was not weakness, her gentleness was not surrender. When someone suggested the children be taken to a distant orphan home, Nalin met their eyes with a look so fierce the suggestion died before it breathed again. She had chosen her place, and it was here. As winter thawed into spring, the ranch blossomed with life. The children laughed more, they fought less, they slept without clinging to each other. And nightly they gathered around Nalin's stories, tales of her people, of courage, of spirits that guided those who walked with honor. She was more than a guardian to them. She was becoming a mother. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and cast long golden shadows through the cabin, the oldest boy approached her quietly. He held something wrapped in cloth, offering it with shy hands. "Pa said a gift means you're part of the family," he murmured. "We want you to stay forever." Nalin unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a small carved wooden horse, rough, uneven, carved by children's hands. She touched it gently, feeling her throat tighten. She looked at the 7 small faces watching her, waiting, hoping she would not vanish like the world had so many times before. She pulled them into her arms, all 7 at once, awkward, tangled, laughing, and whispered, "I am yours now." The words anchored themselves in her soul like roots finding earth. She had not planned for this life, but she realized now that destiny often comes disguised as heartbreak. The house that had once been silent now echoed with footsteps, laughter, and belonging. Nalin stood at the doorway that night, watching the children chase each other beneath the rising moon. The wind carried their joy through the fields, blending with the rustle of grass and the distant cry of an owl. She knew the world outside would not always be kind, but here, within these wooden walls, within these 7 hearts, she had found something she never expected, a place she was needed, a place she could heal, a place she could love without fear of losing herself. She had arrived to marry a stranger, but instead found a family worth fighting for. And on that land, under the endless Montana sky, she became the one thing she never knew she was meant to be. A mother born not of blood but of courage.